Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and happy Rankings Day morning to me. Happy Rankings Day afternoon to you, or whenever you're watching this video, happy that time of day. Previously, this morning, I have released the quarterbacks video and the tight ends videos, so go ahead and check those out if you have any needs there. Later on today, I will be dropping the wide receivers videos, so please just go check out any videos. These are temporary rankings. These are not my final rankings. My final rankings can be seen up live with me on Sunday morning, 1 hour prior to kickoff. And I also put these up on my website. There's a link down in the description. That is www.theffforge.com, where you can find those as of Thursday, and they will get updated a couple of times prior to Sunday. They will have a big change first when they get uploaded onto the website, because I have not done my projections yet. They are quite involved, and there's a lot of players for the running back and wide receivers, so I get those done today after I get these videos recorded, edited, put up, and let's just hop into it. I think that's hopefully all the announcements that I need to go through, and just a quick thank you to everyone for the subs, and let's keep on growing, and let's win some championships. And that begins with the top running backs. So I have these ranked in tiers, and this is kind of a tier 1A, 1B if it's the same color, but faded a little bit differently. Same would, go for any other colors. I've changed 2 tiers if you watched different videos compared to pointing out the top 12, because that's just, I think, a more accurate way of looking at players of who are they most similar to compared to these are top 12, because for instance, once you get to this second tier, you can make some arguments to play some of these players up ahead of Aaron Jones. This just happens to be how I have them ranked in this set of rankings. Then over here are the difficulty matchup ratings. These are red is good, blue is bad, white is neutral, that kind of thing. And these are relative to this week's matchups. Then over here is the difference between myself and the ECR. So here's the big reason why once my projections come in, they will definitely help. Also, there's a lot of question marks that need to be answered throughout the week as far as players' health that are going to have some big implications on the running back rankings. But I start off with the ECR, that is the expert consensus ranking from Fantasy Pros website. Grabbed that last evening, and I then shift them around from there, and that can have some impacts on how much, moving a guy up at some point, it feels like you're doing something wrong, or putting a guy down. But these aren't even the experts' final rankings either. Those will also change throughout the week. But this is how I help to determine who I currently am the most different on. And so hopefully that'll help you to either make or not make any kind of waiver wire decisions, and just kind of plan your lineup accordingly to the best based on the available knowledge. So let's start out with the first tier here at the running back position. Starting off at number 1, I have Austin Ekeler. Number 2, I have Nick Chubb, followed by Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs. And there's that tier cutoff there. These are the guys that I feel super, super confident in this week. And then there's a little bit of less confidence in the order I have them ranked, especially here starting at running back 5 with Jonathan Taylor, followed by Ramondre Stevenson, Kenneth Walker, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. Hopefully you don't have any issues of, am I going to be, who do I not have to play? But that's always possible with this set of players-ish thing. Well, Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson, Kenneth Walker. You could have 4 of these guys. That's very possible. So hopefully you're not in that kind of situation. But if you do have any kind of further questions, if you have an argument for a guy that I have behind somebody else, feel free to drop that, and we can bang it out figuratively, not literally, and help get you the best potential lineup possible. For the tier 2 running backs, there's nobody really to talk about there in the tier 1. Wait, there was one. Josh Jacobs has some health concerns this week, but it is expected that he will play. There's always some risk associated with guys playing a game that are, when they're coming in with a fairly well-known injury. So, of course, you could stock him down a little bit due to that, but ultimately, when it's a really good matchup like this, that's going to override the risk, and I'm just saying, hey, hopefully it works out, is the type of thought process that goes into him being at number 4 compared to discounting him for the injury. Now for my RB2s, or my second tier here of running backs, starting off at RB10, I have Aaron Jones, followed by Rachaad White, Delvin Cook, Tony Pollard, Travis Etienne Jr., David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, Dameon Pierce, Jamal Williams, and Joe Mixon. And this is where the ranking got really, really tough. Like, I want to put Dameon Pierce up fairly high this week. I do think that this is a potentially good week for him. Game flow wise, might be able to stay close to Cleveland, at least in a back and forth rushing type of game for like the first half, and then in the second half, Cleveland starts to pull away. That's been the game flow a lot of this year, and most weeks Dameon Pierce has come through, so I'm feeling somewhat confident in him this week. Want to try to get him in my lineup, but also not going to force it because he does just have a bottomed out floor, and one that we've finally seen a couple of weeks in a row. So that is the only player I had to really talk about. So yeah, that explains why I am 5 spots ahead of the ECR. I'm at 17. The ECR on him is 22nd. Love the matchup, and I do love the talent, just don't love the team that he's on. And that's been the story all season, so I think that is it for who to speak about there. Now let's move on to the third tier of running backs, and ultimately I think the running back position is quite deep right now. We have a lot of shared situations or not totally known situations like an Antonio Gibson and a Brian Robinson, where both of their values are simultaneously higher and lower because of the unknown factor. Like, one of them we would expect in a good matchup against the Giants to go off. And there's a lot of those types of situations, although scoring wise, things will probably go to how they normally end up going. As far as decision-wise comes into the week, there's a lot of players that have some sort of value currently at the running back position. And so let's look at this third tier, starting at number 20 with Gus Edwards, followed by Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson Jr., Ezekiel Elliott, Devin Singletary, DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco, Jeff Wilson Jr., Miles Sanders, Kyren Williams, Latavius Murray, Cordero Patterson, and Tyler Algier to wrap that up at the RB32. So, Gus Edwards, I have 8 spots ahead of the ECR. I have him at 20. The ECR on him is 28. He got the Lions' share of the backfield work last week. It is a fairly tough matchup here going up against Denver, but as you can see, you can get some decent fantasy points against Denver on the ground. It is not the worst matchup. So I like him in what I think that we know is a certain amount of the workload there. So I'll take that and hope for a touchdown more than anything. Also hope for a little bit of proved efficiency over last week. Then Brian Robinson Jr., I have 5 spots ahead of the ECR. I have him at 22nd. The ECR on him is 27th. So I have him and Antonio Gibson back to back here. Nod goes to the incumbent here a little bit with Antonio Gibson. Brian Jr. 2 weeks out of the last 3 weeks has done quite well. So I have a certain amount of faith in those two, and in a decent matchup, I'm hoping for the best from them if I have to play them. It's going to be a little bit hard to keep them above Ezekiel Elliott, maybe Devin Singletary, but the thing about Ezekiel Elliott is he is a little bit touchdown dependent, and against Indianapolis, I do expect a limited point total in that game. Maybe something close to what the New York Giants game would look like, but a tighter share between Gibson and Robinson, whereas Pollard could make it a 60-40 split type thing against over Ezekiel Elliott. So my projections will help me iron that out a little bit, and just looking at some of their recent usage always helps too. Let's move on to DeAndre Swift then, who I have 6 spots ahead of the ECR. I have him at 25th. The ECR on him is 31. Going up against Jacksonville, slightly, pretty much a neutral matchup there. And do expect that to be one of the higher scoring point totals of the week. Potentially, it's a little bit of a shaky high point total, but it should be one of the top 3, top 4 point totals this week. There's probably going to be a lot of fantasy points this week. There's quite a few good matchups. So yeah, I'm hopeful for DeAndre Swift here at 25. I don't quite recall now last Thursday exactly what his usage looked like, if it ticked up at all, but I thought it might have. So I'm definitely not forcing Swift into my lineup, and Isaiah Pacheco could overtake him here very easily. Same with like Jeff Wilson. I don't know without looking at that. He's one of those guys with an injury concern right now that is also brings some question marks onto the table. But let's move over here to Isaiah Pacheco quick, who I have 9 spots ahead of the ECR. I'm at 26. The ECR on him is 35. I don't know if this is some kind of layover from previous rankings that seems lower than what he's ended at in previous weeks. I don't think there's any reason after last week to think less of Pacheco. He has continued to get a good workload, and last week in a matchup where they potentially could have avoided the ground attack, they gave him a shot. He did good with it. Jerick McKinnon didn't take any extra work away from him, and he did good against an opponent who's done well against the run most of the year. So yeah, building some confidence in that in a game here against Cincinnati where I expect a lot of points. So this is a position at Kansas City that I think is pretty touchdown reliant unless you're in non-PPR, in which case touchdowns are even more important in non-PPR too, though. But I expect there to be a good opportunity for him to potentially get a touchdown. Now let's move on to Jeff Wilson Jr., who I have 11 spots behind the ECR. Current injury risk, some injury concern from last week, hungover unless I'm spacing out here in my brain. I don't know. It's just how things worked out. It's the matchup in part. My projections will help me iron out where to put him. I struggled with this area of the rankings. Now let's move on to Miles Sanders, who I have 9 spots behind the ECR. I have him at 28. The ECR on him is 19. Going up against Tennessee, I just see more upside with a lot of these guys. Miles Sanders is going to need a touchdown this week in order to be productive. Tennessee is very good against the run, and he gets a lot of his value is just in the flat floor yards that he gets, and if his efficiency is low in this game, then it could be one of those floor games, and I've predicted those before for him, so I feel pretty confident that I understand when or when not to like Miles Sanders, and this is a week where I would fade him if possible. Then at number 29, I have Kyren Williams going up against Seattle, which is 4 spots ahead of the ECR, who has him at 25 right now. I don't know how super confident I feel having him up here, but we're starting to get into some questionable territory with like Latavius Murray right behind him, but it's a usage thing. Kyren Williams did get on the field quite a bit last week, and I have expected his workload to continue to increase each week. I even expected the potential, his first week back, for him to just be the number 1 back going forward, back when they had 3 running backs. So obviously I have been expecting something from Kyren Williams, and I think we saw that start out last week. Now, of course, it's just not a great team to be the running back for, and he needs to be a little bit more efficient with his carries, but each week he's getting experience, so I like Kyren Williams enough this week. I guess I'm behind the ECR, but I just made an argument for him anyways. Now let's move on to Cordarrelle Patterson, who I have ranked 31st. The ECR is 26, so I have him 5 spots behind the ECR. This is it's like a perfect split between Cordarrelle and Tyler Algier currently. So it's more of a hot hand thing. Who's going to get the hot hand? And I have no clue. So I do like them enough, but it's not a great matchup where I'm bumping them up. There are some situations where I'll take the guarantee over the question mark of who's it going to be type thing in a week where I expect there really to only be one of these guys who ends up with a good fantasy week. Now let's move on to my next tier of running backs, and that starts at 32.5. So you're going to see some of these 0.5s. These are guys who, because of injury things, their rankings are totally in flux right now. So Samaje Perine starts out this tier, followed by A.J. Dillon, Kareem Hunt, JaMycal Hasty, Cam Akers, Ty Johnson, Najee Harris, Zonovan Knight. And so these 0.5s, I just pretty much ranked them where the ECR has them to not fudge any of the other numbers too much. Yeah, Samaje Perine, JaMycal Hasty, Najee Harris, all guys who have, due to injuries, we don't know if they're going to be on the field a lot or not at all. In the case of Najee Harris, Samaje Perine, we had Joe Mixon ranked earlier, so I felt like want to ignore him essentially. JaMycal Hasty, we will have to see on ETN. The expectation is that he will be playing, and so I believe we had him ranked as well. Yeah, right here at 14. But obviously, JaMycal Hasty would be, ranked higher. Same with Samaje Perine if they're playing. Same with Najee Harris. The other thing, Ty Johnson in here, Zonovan Knight, a similar situation there. Is James Robinson going to get involved this week more? Is Michael Carter fine? Is he going to play? These are the questions that we don't know the answers to currently. In half PPR, in full PPR, I do lean a little bit Ty Johnson in a matchup that I expect there to be some back and forth, and I expect them to not be able to just run the ball all game. I expect there to be more situations where Ty Johnson gets onto the field. And then Zonovan Knight, if we go in knowing that it's like these two backs are going to be getting the primary load, I don't, hate him on a scale of A.J. Dillon, Kareem Hunt, a guy who's going to get some work and probably a little bit more, but just he's not the same talent as A.J. Dillon, Kareem Hunt, nor does he have the same matchup on the ground there. Now, let's move on to my final tier, which I did split up into two, starting with Kenyon Drake at my RB38, followed by Jerick McKinnon, Dontrell Hilliard, James Cook, Kenneth Gainwell, Alexander Madison, Boston Scott, and Benny Snell Jr. to wrap that up. We'll get to that. The only one that I really need to talk about here, Dontrell Hilliard. I have 5 spots ahead of the ECR. I'm at 40. The ECR on him is 45. Philadelphia has been quite easy to run against for the most part as of the last several weeks of the season. Maybe prior to that, it was a thing where it wasn't like a bad rushing attack, but it's become evident that you can run against Philadelphia. So in that type of game, maybe Dontrell Hilliard could break a big one. Maybe Tennessee runs the ball a lot of times in this game, and he comes in relief a few, enough times to make himself have some sort of backdoor fantasy value. But that's really what these guys are. It's their desperation plays in the worst of circumstances, but I would have a little bit more trust for some sort of baseline of potential work compared to these guys, and so that's where that minor split is there. The only other guy, so the Pitt running backs, Benny Snell Jr., so we saw that we have Najee Harris up here ranked. None of them ranked very highly. Benny Snell is who I would rank the lowest, even if he is the starter going into week. If Jaylen Warren's out, if Najee Harris is out, and Benny Snell's the starter, I put him probably in a Cam Akers-esque to Zonovan Knight-esque range, wherever that may end up being exactly. Then, as far as Jaylen Warren goes, I would have more faith in him if he gets named the starter. I would have some sort of Kyren Williams, probably higher than that, maybe around a high-end flex, I suppose, option there for Jaylen Warren. And, of course, if Najee Harris is playing, I don't know if we went over this. So, it's a decent matchup here. He would be in this tier. He wouldn't be down in this tier, that's for sure. It would be a little bit dependent on the news of his health as far as exactly how high he gets. But, he could move up. If he were 100% healthy, he's probably in this tier. So that is it for the running backs. Thank you very much, and I will have a wide receiver video coming out later, and check out everything up on the website, here on YouTube. Thank you very much. Peace out. Goodbye.